Brian Garr, welcome to Lingofest.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
This conversation is a long way coming. You and I have known each other for a while.
I remember Las Vegas.
Yes, Las Vegas, and before that, I think we sort of were aware of each other's existence.
Yeah.
Bumping in. I don't know if I bumped into you, speech tech. Were you a frequent attendee of speech tech?
Oh yeah, I think so I was at IBM from 99 to 2009. And I think my first speech tech was 2000. David Nahamu was the keynote, and I think I was the keynote like 2 years later. So I started at the IBM speech group in February of 99.
February 99, yeah. So you've seen the industry evolve from where it was, let's say, more 2 decades and so ago, and I have also seen it, but from a different angle. My perspective comes from more of voice user interface design. I think you're more of a technology guy, I would say, right? The engine.
I haven't figured out what I am yet, so maybe we can dig into that a little bit while we're here.
Exactly. Well, that's the whole point, is to engage in these conversations to inform, but also to inform others, but also to inform ourselves about ourselves, right?
How much do you charge?
It's all pro bono, right? It's an interesting it's an interesting exercise, because I find out things about myself as I talk to folks. Folks find something about themselves, and then the audience learns things. So that's why I think these conversations are useful and fruitful. So I would say, if I were to label you, I don't like to label people, but like the key set of things you've contributed, I think, to the space, I'd say technology among other things, right? So speech recognition engines, I think natural language processing engines, and so forth. And there are, it takes a whole ecosystem to get value delivered to the end user and to the client, right? So maybe we can focus initially on the natural language processing work you've done in the past.
Sure.
I think you built a company, and I think you successfully sold and so forth. Maybe tell us the story of that company, its name and its genesis.
Sure. So LinguaSys, which was a company that I formed with 2 partners, one in Australia and one in Europe, really came, as most things do, out of necessity. So I was at IBM for 10 years. They had a major layoff. 3,000 of my closest friends were on the street. And so looking for something to do, I ended up realizing that if I wanted to do what I wanted to do, I had to start my own company. So I was fortunate enough to find a young man named Vadim Berman in Australia, who had written a really cool machine translation engine. And he had a pseudo interlingua, which was something that I had helped create at GlobalLink, my previous company to IBM. So I wasn't a subject matter expert on machine translation. And so we started talking, and we decided to create a company along with a friend of ours in Germany. And so LinguaSys was born. And funny thing, we because of my decade at IBM, I felt really comfortable about what I was doing. I had created a lot of business cases for a lot of new products and ventures for IBM, did a little M&A work for them as well, created tons of business cases that I took up to Armonk for the executives to look at. So I felt comfortable around that. And so I started going on the money raising circuit, which is a very fascinating world unto itself. And I decided to, after I'd raised a couple $100,000, and I had landed a couple of good customers like Marriott and HSBC, and American Express, and I decided to go for a bigger round, and I wrote a blind email to Mark Cuban. And I said, look, here are my customers, early stage, machine translation. And a week later, he said, tell me more. And 3 months later, I had raised money from Mark. And he was a wonderful investor. Things went a little south at the end of the whole thing. Even though we sold it, we had some problems afterwards. But it was great experience. Never worked harder in my entire life. But LinguaSys started off as a machine translation company, and then we realized when NLU and pre-Alexa started to become more popular, we realized that at least in the semantic world, the first half of machine translation is to understand semantically and syntactically the source sentence. So basically, we were doing intent classification before it was a thing. So we realized that, and then we started doing NLU. We started doing analytics for tweets and things like that, and all the things you can do when you can analyze a sentence. We were semantic. We were rule-based, so we were not doing deep learning, even though that was in its infancy at the time. And we actually, when we made the decision to sell LinguaSys at the end of 5.5 years, because all of our investors, basically those kind of investors, are looking for a 5-year. That's how long they expect before they'll see some return on their money. So we thought we were well positioned, and we actually were on the desk of Steve Ballmer, and got pretty far along in Apple. But they decided that there was this new way of doing things using math, and they decided that since we were rule-based, they were going to pass and go another way. So we eventually did sell to a company out of Orlando. But again, we did a lot of cool things. We did a lot of analytics on tweets real early. We did a lot of basic NLU, nothing in terms of actual Q&A type of technology, but mostly natural language understanding and analytics.
Wonderful. And can you share the name of that company or not? The one you sold to?
Oh yeah. We sold to. I got to remember the name of it. So give me a second to think of that.
No worries,
because
no worries. Yeah. So I wanted to actually, the question is coming up naturally because I wanted to touch on the delta between statistical neural
Right.
net kind of way of solving AI and NLP and so forth, and then rule-based one, right? If you were to describe it to the layperson, or somebody who is technology savvy enough to understand what you're saying, but is not into the space, AI in general, or how would you describe the difference between the two?
So on a rule-based system, there are a couple of important pieces. First of all, we take every word in a sentence to its morphological root. So we want to know the origin of the word, uninflected. And once we have that, then we start looking at the relationships of the words as far as we assign parts of speech, basically. So, and you know, to a certain extent, it's all guesswork, and you look for your confidence levels on all of your guesses, and you might have n best. You know, you're going to look at what's the n best result. So, and then once you've assigned the part of speech, then you look for relationships between the words. So, what's the main verb? What's it acting on? If you get the main verb wrong, then you're lost, because you know you can't do it. If the system guesses wrong on the main verb, then the rest of it's going to be trash.
Mhm.
So that was sort of the danger of that approach. But um, it was strange because when I entered the speech world, um, I assumed that speech was doing things the same way we were, and boy, was I totally wrong because we were using in speech we were using trigram models, and it was all statistical,
Mhm.
not neural. So I think there's actually three phases. I think there's rule based, there's statistical, and now there's neural with machine learning. So those are three separate steps. And so the rule based is all about understanding the language from a grammatical sense,
Mhm.
basically diagramming a sentence like you may have done when you were in school.
Mhm.
Uh, Statistical is more what are the odds of this word being the right word? It's all based on again, I like the idea that there's always a confidence level
Mhm.
score of some sort, but it's in statistical, you still have a large vocabulary. It's still vocabulary based, and usually you use a large section of words that um, have tags associated with them. So you know that certain words are tagged as adverbs or adjectives or verbs or nouns, and those are all clues in helping you to map out the source sentence.
Mhm.
And now you get into neural networks and machine learning, and certainly you can train with machine learning. Then you have those hidden layers in your neural nets, and who knows what goes on inside of those things. So it's all a matter of what's my confidence level with this algorithm versus this approach, and how do I tweak it until I get to. I don't want to overtrain it because I don't want 100% accuracy because then I got junk and it won't be able to predict anything. But if I have like 97, 98% accuracy, then
Mhm.
I'm more comfortable with what I produced.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Would you say that just pushing a little bit so that see if we can get um like the bottom line difference? Would you say that rule-based approaches are based on our knowledge about language? We know what a verb is, and we know what the preposition is, and so
Yeah,
forth.
absolutely. Actually, it's really based on some concepts that Noam Chomsky put out there in the
Mhm.
50s about the relationship of language, and it was built on a lot of his early work.
Right.
So
Right.
it's definitely a grammatical
Yeah.
exercise, not a statistical one, which
Right.
still has its pluses. I mean, I still look at I don't know. Machine translation has come a long way since the days in the early 90s when I was working on it. And the neural approach seems to be the best approach I've seen to date, but it's still not good enough. So
Hmm.
uh,
Well.
predictions of
Mhm.
machine translation being good enough have never really come to fruition. Whereas speech recognition now is 98% accurate, 97% accurate.
Yeah.
People depend upon it on a daily basis. It's commonplace.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I think that problem has been solved more or less. Um, Maybe not efficiently, perhaps, just because we need so much data. But then again, one thing you can say is that has been solved. I think to a certain extent, I think the NLP, not the translation, but NLP, meaning getting meaning out of text and being
Yes,
able to do things like summary and so forth, and being
right.
able to ask questions and get
Natural
answers.
language generation. Yeah,
Right,
that's
natural
all.
language. I think
Those
that's
are
more.
solved problems.
Those are more or less solve problems, right? Um, so what I was thinking is in terms of the differences. So, like rule base is about knowledge about our knowledge about language, the
Right.
structures and all that. And then I think statistical neural is about the data that we've collected, right? It's about data. It's not really about knowledge, but it's about pieces of information and the relationship between the items and so forth, right?
Right.
Mhm. And then my question to you is, so there is knowledge about language, and there is not really knowledge, but just data about the world. say images or sentences, right, that we just collect, and then we have these interesting, let's call them machines, that go about and finding, patterns, and being able to say, okay, this formulation is a variation of that formulation, and therefore they're more or less the same in terms of an intent, and so forth, right? But then there is a third kind of knowledge that we have about the world, right? Which is knowledge, right? So we know, for
Right.
example, that that a bowling ball is heavier than a balloon, even though they look the same, right? So that's knowledge, right? We know,
Right.
for example, that the sun, when it rises, it creates light. That's knowledge, right?
Right.
And I remember, because I was also working in this world, there was also semantic representations of objects, right? It has certain
Right.
properties, and so on and so forth. And it seems to both the rule based, and all of them feel like they could contribute to to solving the problem, even though, let's say, the problem of translation, perhaps, which is not solved yet. So do you think the hybrid, where it's pulling information from, okay, I understand how a sentence in French is structured, and how a sentence in English is structured, and I'm going to leverage that. And also I know things about the world, and also I have statistical evidence about how people um, speak, right?
Right.
Or and so forth. So this the hybrid. My point is, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts about the hybrid methodology, or if there's any merit?
So I was always a strong proponent and believer in the hybrid approach.
Mhm.
Um, I'm looking now at what, for example, Google is doing with speech recognition, where they don't have a vocabulary anymore. And
Mm,
they're just breaking up a sine wave and saying, well, we know what that letter looks like. And I'm not even going to worry if it's a word or not. I'm just going to say, this is what you created.
mhm, mhm,
And that approach, which as it grows and builds its own internal vocabulary, gets better and better and better, will eventually approach or beat the quality we have now. On the other hand, life, I mean, so you don't have to worry about idiomatic expressions if you're merely um, gluing together
yeah.
letters, right? You don't need a vocabulary. You don't care if you crack a joke. You crack a joke, even though you can't crack a joke. You can only crack an egg, but
Mm,
it doesn't matter if you're ignoring the vocabulary totally. Haven't Don't know how successful that will be, but I have a feeling it's going to be pretty successful. So that then beggars the question: what's the value of vocabulary in training? Uh,
mhm.
we don't need a vocabulary when we're training machine learning on how to recognize different animals by a fence, so you know whether it's a human or an animal by a fence,
Mhm.
unless you consider pictures as the vocabulary. So a picture of an
Mhm.
animal might be the representation of a deer. Um, but it's interesting, and natural language generators now are doing incredible things, and it's hard to wrap your head around where this is all heading. If
Yeah.
we ever, I don't know. I think it's amazing, natural language generators, that you can just say, "Tell me a story," and it will generate a story.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you say natural language generator, it is talking about software that creates readable text.
Right.
That makes
So
sense. Okay.
yeah, Facebook has 16 billion nodes or something like that. So it's a competition now to see who can have the most nodes. Um, and what they do is amazing.
What's a node?
Well, it's an element. I mean, and
Mhm.
I haven't really looked deeply into how NLGs are created, and it's on my list of things to do while I'm doing a lot of other things at the same time. But
Mhm.
I'm fascinated by NLGs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I think text summarization is pretty
Yeah,
impressive. I've seen where it condenses, 20
yeah,
paragraphs into two, and you get you get the gist of what, right, of which is like sort of like speed reading, except that you don't have to jump paragraphs. It figures out for you. Um, and then I've seen stories generated, say let's say local things that happen in the community, right? So traffic accidents, road
right,
closings, and so forth, the weather and all that. It pulls all together and creates like 2 or 3 paragraphs where you can just read as opposed to,
right,
look at the metrics, right? Which is interesting, right? And that sort of creates interesting problems because usually um, young reporters, that's where they begin building their craft by writing
right.
those, right? So are we losing some of that there? But anyway, that opens up like everything else, right? It solves something and creates new problems.
Right. And then there are ethical questions about where to use it, when to use it, et cetera. And those are even more difficult to solve because you can't enforce them. So it's a question
Right.
of how do you apply that in an ethical sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Or how you convert ethics into laws and regulations and so on. So you said you're doing a lot of other things. What is the most exciting thing that you can share with us that you're doing today?
So
Um,
yeah, so right now I'm chief product officer for a startup called Puretalk.ai, and it's wonderful. First of all, it's great to be around young people, and it's great to be around young inventors and people that are devoted to an idea and to a concept turned into reality. So what we've done with some really brilliant people here is created an amazing speech synthesis engine that's not only neural based, but we have some proprietary algorithms that do some amazing things pre and post production of the synthesis, so that um, it really sounds like you're talking to a human. And our Ruth NLU component, which is I still don't I lose the acronyms occasionally,
Too many
but it's
acronyms in our life.
amazing. Yeah, I've got
Hmm.
alphabet soup in my brain sometimes, but it's really amazing conversation. When I first came on board, the phone rang, my cell phone rang, and I started talking to someone, and it was Gabby, one of our voices, talking to me with a I think it was a pitch about healthcare, and it was amazing. She just responded to everything I said, and she had the appropriate number of pauses and ums and ahs and off the cuff kind of speech, which is all done with natural language generators, and it's just amazing that I met. I did a speech on this for a Berlin conference a couple months ago on how close are we to beating the Turing test, and we've beaten it. I mean, starting with the Google haircut uh, demo that was done at, I think that was in 2018 at the
Hmm.
keynote for one of the Google conferences, where the computer made a haircut appointment. I think that really sort of broke the logjam with as far as the Turing test. I think there's one, I forgot, there's an award given for breaking the Turing test, and I think last year was its last year because it's just too obvious now. It's just too easy to do to fool humans, 60-70% of the time with really fantastic NLU and the speech synthesis we can create now with neural nets and machine learning.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, for me, this is a big topic. So, and I have a stand on it, and I would love to engage you on it before we get into that, before we open that Pandora's box. um, um, so PureTalk.ai, right? This is the company, right?
Yes, PureTalk.ai.
Okay.
Thank you for the plug.
Um, You bet. And is what are the use cases that you would like, that you think the technology is going to be best suited for? What kind
So
of
the
problems will you
the
solve for the end user and your clients?
so the founder has a long background in healthcare with medical devices. His family were the people behind help me. I've fallen and I can't get up. So
Hmm.
so the kinds of use cases we're looking at is calling an elderly person and reminding them to take their pills, and maybe having a conversation with them if they're feeling lonely. So we can go from a very specific task and follow up. Okay, can you go get your pills while I'm on the phone with you? And
Hmm.
did you take them? That's great. And follow up with a very natural kind of computer generated conversation. And then if they want to talk about other things, we can do that as well, just to keep them on the line a little bit longer. If because a lot of people in their 80s and above are alone and enjoy company and enjoy conversation on the phone. Sometimes going to the doctor is the big event of the day for them, and
Hmm.
so we like to find ways to make that more comfortable. That's one of our populations that we want to
Hmm.
look after.
Yeah, and that's a growing. Isn't like 80 people in the 80s is the fastest growing segment? I heard some
Yeah, I'll let you know when I get there. It won't be long now.
yeah, we're in a good spot. I mean, we're lucky that we're getting older, but in a healthy way, right? I think
Yeah.
if we watch our health, I mean,
Oh
there's
yeah.
one can have a lot of years of a lot of productive years ahead. Um, Even if they are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. I've seen some very productive people in their 90s who have their brain fully functioning and with their enthusiasm there, and very impressive.
So I've played tennis all my life, tournament tennis all my life, and the international championships were at my club down here in Florida. Uh, and in the 90 and overs, there were two entrants in singles. No, doubles. I'm sorry, in doubles. And I watched the match. They get to the ball, they hit the ball. It was really amazing. In 90 and over, ITF
Yeah, yeah.
was. It gave me hope.
Yeah, I mean, I read a study, what is it, a couple of months ago that says folks who are born in the early 21st century can expect to live to 100 and more as a way, just like, we're expecting people to live in their 80s,
Yes.
now, right? So
Yep.
that's the impact in terms of the technology, in terms of the knowledge about what is healthy and what is not healthy, being involved in your life and so forth. So like 100 is going to be not a hey wow 100. It's going to be okay, just like now 80, right? Or 90.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.